Welcome, sports fans, and thank you for tuning in to the first ever virtual sports beat. I'm your host, Ryan Yee, coming up all the latest in Hofstra sports and more. You're not going to want to miss it, so don't go anywhere. Welcome into Sports Beat. So glad you can join us this evening. We have a jam-packed show for you. As always, our analysts are going to bring it tonight, breaking down all the latest in Hofstra sports and more. We also have special guests for you tonight. Head coach Joe Mihalick and Connor Clementovich of the Hofstra men's basketball team will join us, as well as senior of the men's lacrosse team, Ryan Tierney, and Hofstra Athletics Director Rick Cole Jr. So you're not going to want to miss any of that as they bring you the latest information with regards to Hofstra sports. But before we hop into it, although we may be all apart right now as part of as we practice social distancing at home, it won't stop us, the Hofstra sports community, from getting together and talking about the sports we love. Together, we can definitely get through these tough times. So we want you, the Hofstra fans, to get involved. Leave us a comment down below on our YouTube stream. Be a part of our discussion. Ask a burning question you may have for some of our analysts or special guests. Share with us some of your thoughts and your takes, and we'll do our best to bring you on as part of the discussion. Now, with that being said, we got lots to talk about. Like I said, we have to talk about spring eligibility, recruitment, the way that's been affected by this coronavirus pandemic, CAA, March Madness, and a senior reflection on how this final year has kind of gone for senior athletics and their collegiate careers. So to start off this very first virtual sports beat episode, we're going to get into spring eligibility. I want to bring on my first analyst here for this evening, Eddie Fitzgerald, to start breaking down what it is going to mean for these spring athletes coming up this next year. But first, Eddie, before we get into it, how's it going, man? It's been a while since we've been on the air together.
It has been a while since we've been on the air together, Ryan. You know, I miss not being on Hofstra's campus, miss being out in the island. I'm in Pennsylvania right now, in my home, and it's been interesting. No sports, nothing to do, but gotta stay safe. Gotta stay safe in these trying times.
Yeah, it's definitely been some tough times. I mean, you know, you and I both used to spend a lot of time at the comm school, whether that's at the radio station, whether that's doing things like this in Sports Beat and just digesting the Hofstra community and being involved with Hofstra sports. All that time now, I'm having a tough time of filling what I used to be doing. So why don't you share with us what you've been able to do in terms of trying to kill some time here?
Well, I've just been working on journalism, man, and reaching out for possible interviews, just doing everything I can, staying involved, doing remote work for the radio station as well. I've also picked up a little bit of cooking skills, which has been nice. So coming back, maybe don't need to eat the campus food as much. I'll be able to cook, which will be nice. But, you know, got to make the best out of your situation.
Yeah, most definitely. So it's definitely been tough to figure it out, but hey, you're learning how to cook, so that's always a good thing. Maybe that's one thing that on the other side appreciating a little bit more. But let's get right into this spring eligibility situation here when it comes to the NCAA, Eddie. On March 30th, the Division I Council for NCAA voted to allow schools to provide spring sports student athletes an additional season of eligibility and competition. First, before we kind of nitpick at the little, details of this decision, what was kind of your overall reaction when you first heard the news about this?
Well, at first I was like, wow, I can't believe that they actually did that. It didn't seem like that was something that they were actually going to do. And then they ended up passing it as a whole. I think it's just like an homage to everything getting left behind. But then on my second thought was, wait, how are they going to do this? Like, how can you ensure that these players are going to be able to come back? Because you're just offering the extra year of eligibility doesn't necessarily mean that everybody who was a senior and a spring sport athlete is going to get to come back.
Yeah, so it's definitely interesting. We'll start off, I guess, with that first point there, because I think looking at this in a positive light, Eddie, it was a glimmer of hope for, I guess, spring sport athletes that, you know, at one point thought that their collegiate careers were over. And I think more than anything, I know there's logistics that are involved with this situation, whether that's financial things, whether that's just academics or other things that can be involved. I think the first overlying thought here is the fact that at least there's an opportunity for these athletes to kind of have that shot at going out on their own terms. How, I guess, put into your words what that means kind of for athletes here to at least have that chance to come back.
Well, to have that chance to come back, it's huge. I mean, when you're taking a look at a freshman who just came on this year and they didn't really get any playing time, they didn't get a chance to work with their teammates. Now they have that extra year of eligibility because now every freshman who came in this year can technically be a fifth-year senior and pick up an extra minor. And we'll start to see the effects of that later on down the line once you and I have graduated. And when you take a look at some of the seniors having that ability to come back, that is when you look at some of the top players, people who have honed their craft, who are at the top of the CAA, now have an extra chance, another year of growth, another year of training to come back and be even more dominant.
Right. And one player that comes to mind that I know you have a lot of familiarity with, as being the beat reporter for the women's lacrosse team for WRHU, is a lot of the members of the lacrosse team who had such high expectations coming into this season. I mean, Alyssa Perella, she was historical records here for that team and for the whole program, and not just for Hofstra, but for the whole Colonial Athletic Association. I mean, for her, at least to have that option, I know that it's still hard in terms of making the decision, but to at least have that option to come back and finish maybe some unfinished business and to go beyond and continue to add to her illustrious career is just one of the examples out of many of the athletes at Hofstra who can continue to add to their resume and at least have that option. But let's get into kind of the logistics here about what this actually means in terms of spring eligibility. And we'll start from kind of the school perspective of it, because like you mentioned, even though that there is the opportunity now that there is this extra year of competition, it doesn't mean that schools can necessarily capitalize on it.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think that this is basically a move for the bigger schools in terms of what the NCAA is able to do, not necessarily a Hofstra program, because schools have a set amount of scholarships that they're allowed to give out for certain sports for every single year. And when you're offering those scholarships, at least in terms of what I know with the women's lacrosse team, they have 5 people coming in this year. I'm assuming all of those females coming on as freshmen, true freshmen, will be playing on scholarship, which is set on a 4-year period. That means that there is no extra money unless they are able to finagle around different parts of the budget. Maybe they don't get equipment, maybe they don't do this, and they're able to work on getting to that next level. However, if they can only bring back some of the players, schools will not bring back any players on scholarship because that leads to discriminatory issues. That means that you don't have the ability to treat everybody equally. So in the case of like again, I keep bringing up women's lacrosse. If you bring back Alyssa Perella because you have enough money for a 1-year scholarship, but you don't bring back Darcy Smith, that does not help your case as a university. It does not look good for the university. It shows player favoritism, student favoritism, and that runs into a whole different issue. So it's basically a school-on-school basis, and the schools that make the most money will probably have the most opportunities to keep offering scholarships to those players who hopefully return.
Now that leads me to another question. I mean, obviously the NCAA does this out of good faith and out of good intentions, but do you think there needed to be a little bit more thought about this in terms of evening the playing field, allowing these mid-tier schools who maybe not have as much funding in their athletic systems to kind of balance it out? Because it's tough. I mean, there's huge advantages of being a big school versus a mid-tier school like you're mentioning.
Yeah, and I think that the NCAA sort of rushed into it a little bit. I think that, they announced that the spring sports season was going to be canceled on the 12th, and then on the 14th, they said that they were granting an extra year of eligibility. I think that the NCAA, mostly in this case, was looking to have a positive PR release after such a negative release in canceling the entire spring sports season. I don't really think there is a way to level the playing field unless you could say, all right, schools, you can give all these players scholarships and, they don't have to pay you anything because they lost their ability. Because no, they are still taking classes. They are fulfilling the student requirement of playing on scholarship. So it's 6 1, half a dozen the other, right? You can't have it both ways. You can't have all these players have scholarships for free, but you also can't have these big schools dominating these small schools who get the ability to have people come back.
Right, definitely a tough situation. So let's now dive deeper now into kind of the player perspective. We talked about how schools are kind of affected by this decision, but now players need to ultimately make that decision whether or not they want to return, whether or not it is under scholarship or not under scholarship. There's obviously financial issues. If you don't have a scholarship, are you willing to pay the extra money to stay at the school to then compete an extra year? There's also the academic question. If I was already on track to graduate in May of 2020, am I taking another major? Am I taking additional courses just so I can play another year? Why don't you talk about how it is to be a player and kind of finagle with all these decisions and all these different factors?
You know, a lot of different players are coming to a lot of different decisions. We see Ryan Tierney on the men's lacrosse team, who is coming up later to discuss his decision on coming back. But then you take a look at somebody who I've had personal contact with, which is Darcy Smith. And she said that a lot of it comes down to discussing things with their families, what they want to do. Darcy is graduating in 2020 this year with a marketing degree. She believes that she has a job out there for a potential. If you're going to pass up a job opportunity because you want to continue to play sports, that becomes a whole other issue. And that's something that you need to discuss with your families, and your financial aid becomes a whole other deal. Not to, subject ourselves, but Hofstra is not the cheapest school in the world. And when you're taking a look at from a Hofstra athlete's perspective, if they are not going to be able to have a scholarship to play on, that means that they're putting money out of their pocket that they didn't originally have to, when they could be making money in the real world and just say, hey, this season was a wash. So there's a lot of different factors. And then there's that unfinished business factor. When you're taking a look at a team, like men's lacrosse, like women's lacrosse, like baseball or softball, where there was such pride, such, promise for their seasons, and then that all gets taken away. How can you leave on that note? But all the signs might point for you to leave that note. And it's a decision that players have to come to on their own. And I think with their families, I don't think that there's one right answer here. Right. I think that it's just, you have to do what's best for you.
Now let's kind of look into the future of how this affects kind of programs as a whole, and not just, I guess, the near distant future. Because I think this shakes up the program plan they had moving forward in terms of developing players and in terms of how they're going to move their program in a certain direction. If you're bringing back certain senior players, obviously that's going to take away time from some of your younger players, especially if they're key players. So how as, I guess, a manager or coach of one of these teams, we're trying to juggle with all these different decisions, and how does this ultimately affect maybe underclassmen, freshmen, sophomore, who are expecting to go into the 2021 season, maybe having a starting role, but now can't because there's a senior that's there, which is understandable, but still has an effect on the overall development of certain players.
Yeah, it absolutely has an effect on developing certain players. When you're taking a look at a guy on the men's lacrosse team like Sam Lutfi, who came into a starting role and was putting up, insane amounts of points per game early on in that season, maybe there are other guys on there who won't be able to get that extra year of development. And then from the perspective of somebody who's not even starting, you're running into an issue now where the coach now has to be involved. And so if I'm a coach, you have to play with what you have, and you can't go in expecting anything. You can't go in expecting that your seniors are going to come back. To me, I think you have to plan and just see where we are from right now, because the future is very uncertain right now with the way that this entire pandemic is going. And, hopefully we are back for 2021 spring sports season. But right now you just have to do what you can to be able to work for your 2021 season. So I would say to all the coaches, listen, you got to move on and act as if those players aren't there, because then if they come back, that's just an added bonus for you. So if you could start scheming right now as if they weren't there, you're going to be great. And when they're not, and when they're coming back, it's going to be able to work out much better for you.
I do think you nailed it on the head, though. Before we get into any of this, we need to make sure that obviously it's safe to play and everyone is healthy, and it's a safe environment for all the athletes. But that being said, there's no question that this has absolutely shaken up the collegiate sports landscape. whether that's from a financial perspective, whether that's from an academics perspective, players, everyone. There's no one here that has been left unaffected by this situation, by the extension and the confirmation of an extra eligible year for potential athletes. It's going to be an interesting one, Eddie, that's for sure. So I want to bring on Max Sacco as we start to transition to this recruiting topic next for this segment. Thank you, Eddie, for joining us. And Max, there's a whole lot to talk about when it comes to recruiting and how this coronavirus pandemic has affected this whole situation. But before we get onto it, man, we've spent a lot of time together at the radio station. Tell me how you're doing, man. It's been a long time.
Ryan, it's been a crazy time. I've been sitting here I've been reading books again. I have time to read again. I've just been doing homework, reading books. I've been starting to work out in my basement a bit. I've actually lost a little weight as well. So, positive strides during this time. Positive strides.
That's definitely the way to take it. I mean, if you mark down the list, I think for you go, all right, you got your WRHG responsibility, sports beat responsibilities up at number 1. And then it's consuming sports, and you're slowly crossing down the list. I guess you finally get to reading books. Finally, I can't imagine that doing schoolwork is up there that high either. So finally, you've made it down to that list where you're doing that during this extra time that we have. But I mean, what else have you been doing in terms of trying to get over your, I guess, craving for sports? I know I've been starting to watch a lot of older games, reliving the Raptors series from last season. Going a little bit bonkers here, Max. What have you been doing to kind of get over this kind of absence of sports?
Well, Ryan, you have 1 ring. We have 6.
Oh.
I've been rewatching some of the 90s Bulls highlights a little bit. The Jordan documentary comes out this Sunday. Very excited. My mom and I will be binging that together. We're excited for that. But other than that, been interviewing some sports people for RHU as well, because surprisingly, talking to other people who are just as miserable that you don't have sports is actually a fun way to talk about it.
Yeah, it's definitely a crazy time right now. Interesting how we have to spin this kind of sports landscape to kind of figure out what the interesting content is there, but it's definitely out there. And I've heard some of those interviews and they've been absolutely fantastic. But let's dive right into this whole recruiting situation, because that's where we're here and that's why we're bringing you on to talk about, because just like spring eligibility, this is something that has huge shockwaves throughout the collegiate landscape. And I'm just going to start off with here. How do you think that this whole coronavirus pandemic is going to affect recruiting as a whole?
Ryan, it's going to have a huge effect, because I think you need to look at your teams now from top to bottom. I mean, this is an issue that doesn't just affect Hofstra. It affects everyone. I had a chance to speak to actually some of the softball coaches of the CAA, and I talked to JMU's Lauren Laporte today, their softball coach. And that what Lauren said was, she goes, listen, I don't care if you're our top senior this year. If you come back next year and you're not the best, we're not going to start you. It's that simple. And for other teams, Ryan, the issue's been, well, I have these great seniors, and now they're wondering if they're going to come back. Eddie hit it best. If you want to recruit, you need to just recruit like you would have, and that our seniors graduated, it's time to go to the next class and build up from there. Anything else is just a bonus you can have.
And let's talk about kind of the logistics in terms of how recruiting is going to change, because I feel like that in-person relationship, that was a big thing for me that kind of stood out. The in-person relationship is huge. The opportunity for coaches and recruiters to travel out, meet these players one-on-one, show them the campus, show them the school, show them what it's like to live on Hofstra, on Hofstra's campus, show them what it's like to be a part of the fantastic facilities that are on the Hofstra campus. They don't have that ability anymore. They're doing it from the luxuries of their own home, which obviously makes sense. Everyone needs to stay safe right now and continue practicing the social distancing and staying at home and being safe as we try to get past these tough times. But how do you think that's going to play an effect? I think it's going to have a huge effect on recruiting players.
It will. You're going to see I think you're going to see a lower trend of players coming from out of state. Hofstra's a New York college, or a Long Island specifically college. You're going to get a lot of kids from Long Island because, I grew up playing at Hofstra. I grew up seeing something at Hofstra. I already know what that campus looks like. For a kid from Illinois, let's say, all of a sudden, I didn't get a chance to see them. Do I really want to go out there on just sight unseen, regardless of it? You're going to see a lot of kids start to play at home now, play at their home colleges, play at colleges maybe an hour away, 2 hours away, places they grew up with, places that they saw. For me, growing up in Chicago, I saw a lot of the University of Chicago, Illinois. So I saw what their campus looked like from a young age. I never saw Hofstra until I was 17, 18. So kids are going to stay home where they're comfortable now, because while you'll get a couple to take the risk, a lot of them don't want to risk it because, again, they're athletes, Ryan. But at the end of the day, they're still people. They still have to go to class. They still need to function on campus. They don't just play softball or lacrosse 24/7.
And that leads me to an interesting point there, because I do agree. I think that is an interesting take in terms of players may stay at home because, like you say, they've experienced the campus. And I think there's a sense of familiarity there when you are trying to choose a school. You want to choose the place that you're most comfortable with, especially a big decision where you're going to spend the next 4 years. But that's my question. Is it going to be the next 4 years? Are we going to see a ripple effect here? We get through this time. We get into the 2021, 2022 years. Do you think maybe we'll start to see a little bit more transfers going forward because, you played and you had that 1 year of eligibility that you played at that place you're comfortable, but then you had an opportunity to go see a school that you maybe didn't get to see, or you started to get more experience with that after this whole situation kind of pans out. You think we'll see transfers increasing further?
It's tough to tell because I think it comes down to school size. Because I think for your major schools, if you're a baseball player and you get an offer to Duke, I think you're going to bite the bullet and go there sight unseen. But if you take a mid-major offer, you go to your mid-major, and let's say along the line you get an offer from a big school. We see this in basketball and football a lot, guys transferring for an extra fifth year or transfer for the junior, senior year. Then I think we're going to see the transfers. But I don't think there's going to be a spike. I think we're still going to have just the normal amount of transfers that we see normally. The senior who never got to play, like Joe Burrow, and he transfers, and all of a sudden becomes a superstar. The kid who lost it all but comes back. I think we're going to see transfers like that, but I don't think we're going to see this humongous spike because of the coronavirus.
And we're talking with Max Sauer here, breaking down the recruiting that is affected by this coronavirus pandemic. We are going to have an interview with Athletics Director Rick Cole Jr. coming up in just a moment's time. But a few more questions here for you, Max, as you continue to break down how this whole recruiting thing is going to shake out. Do big schools have an advantage? I mean, you mentioned big schools and mid-tier schools and a difference there. Do big schools have an advantage here because there is more popularity? Obviously, good players are going to know the good schools and the big schools. Since players can't travel around and maybe discover those smaller schools where they may excel at, do bigger schools like the ones you mentioned, like Duke, like, the big tier schools, are they going to have an advantage during this time?
100%. 100%, Ryan, because the big schools have two things that mid-majors and small schools don't have: money and the name. Hofstra's a very well-known name in the East Coast. Midwest, not so much. Duke, on the other hand, that's a name, West Coast to East Coast, through their basketball program, through their lacrosse program. They have the money to retain their athletes, give some scholarship money. But more than that, Ryan, when it comes to recruiting, do I go to the small school, like you said, where I can excel at, or, I got an offer from Duke, I don't even have to tour it. Just the name already makes me want to go there. They're going to have that advantage versus the big school and the small school. And that's why I think we're going to see a little bit of a spike to students going to a big school for a commit, because there's people who come to the small school instead of the big school. But now I think we're going to see the reverse now, where the big school is going to get more than the small school in terms of recruits.
And now let's talk about kind of the strategies that maybe mid-tier schools can kind of adapt to and maybe inherit as they try to get through these tough times when it comes to the challenge of recruiting. What can mid-tier schools do in order to make up for that lost disadvantage in terms of, recruiting those players and getting them to come to schools like Hofstra?
Well, one, stay local. Look at some of the best Hofstra athletes are from the Long Island area. Zachary Knight Ward for wrestling is a hometown kid in Uniondale. Alyssa Perella, Ryan Tierney, Long Island kids, they're from Long Island. Use your home base. Use where you are from. And number two, if you have a pipeline established, use the pipeline. The volleyball team is very good at importing players from Europe. Two of the best players to ever walk through this program were from Italy. If you can keep your pipelines up and keep good contacts with the people in that area, use those still. And also, again, do a little bit more of a fine comb at home. You'll find some gems that maybe would have went to the big school that you can make into a superstar at your mid-major.
And maybe, Max, the force, or I guess the situation that we're in right now that's forcing us to kind of maybe look more closely to those local players. Maybe we'll find some of those hidden gems that you're talking about, and maybe find some really good players here on the island alone to come to Hofstra in the coming years that may become some household names here as part of the Hofstra Sports. And now, last question here for you, Max, before we do have our interview with Athletics Director Rick Cole Jr. you mentioned all these teams that they can start figuring out how to recruit and figure out what they can do in terms of finding local players, and you mentioned some names there. But what teams in specific are going to have more tougher times than other teams because of this whole situation and the shift in recruiting tactics?
Well, I think one of the toughest teams we're going to see is field hockey. I mean, field hockey is a team that if you look at that lineup from top to bottom, they recruit very heavily from out-of-seas countries. They recruit a lot from Europe. They recruit a lot from Pennsylvania. They recruit a lot from those places. They're going to have a tough time getting some names back. So beyond field hockey, Ryan, I think in the spring sports, softball a little bit, because softball has a lot of Long Island girls, but at the same time, a huge half of that team is from Alabama, California, Chicagoland suburbs, where now you're going to see some of those teams struggle a bit. But on the other hand, teams like men's basketball, women's basketball, wrestling, your winter sports, where they actually have a lot of players from Long Island, Connecticut, New York City area, they'll have those players to come right back with no issues. It's going to be the teams that import a lot from Europe and the teams that reach very far out of state where we're going to see some trouble to pull back.
And I guess you can kind of look on the flip side there too, Max. I mean, the sports that are very popular here on the island, like lacrosse that you mentioned, maybe we'll have an advantage there because the island does have a tendency to produce a lot of really good players.
100%. Long Island is a lacrosse hotbed, Ryan, and this might actually give us those hidden gems like we're talking about. And I think it's who they're going to have to look for too, is staying home. So be local. Shop local. We hear it all the time on the news. Shop local for your next prospects, Ryan. So, Ryan, I think it's time now that we bring on Rick Cole Jr. to hear what he has to say now about recruiting and how it affects the future of Hofstra in the next coming seasons. So, Rick, thank you very much for joining us today.
Glad to be here, guys. Apologize. Needed to get the mute button off. I didn't want to interrupt in any way. So thanks for having me.
No problem. So, Rick, first question. You're very big. You've been in the sports, I guess, business, recruiting, college sports for a while. Have you ever experienced anything like this before we get into recruiting, just this sudden stoppage of everything?
No, I don't think anybody's experienced anything like this. I think pockets of the country have experienced some really challenging things, right? So Katrina years ago and Sandy and some lots of different things, but this is just, the world has stopped, the country has stopped. It's not a bias of where we're at. This is truly impacting everybody. So no, I haven't seen anything like it.
And now, Rick, on to recruiting now. The two biggest sports really that are affected here, all three really, but the biggest one's is spring because they don't have a season, and also the fall sports because they don't have time to train now. They lose that spring season. Of those two, which one do you think is going to have the bigger effect on their recruitment for the next season, spring or the fall sports?
I think it's a little unique, right? I think with the new legislation that provides the opportunity for the seniors to come back, is really a very different challenge or opportunity depending on which lens you're looking through. Because those classes, I was listening to a little bit of your comments, and I think you're right. I think, those rosters may be a little bit larger than they normally will be, and you're going to have some options, right? Ryan Tierney coming back is not a bad thing for our men's lacrosse program. And, but I'm certain that some other folks thought that would be an opportunity maybe that they would have, right? And what implications does that have? I mean, nobody's ever going to be upset that Ryan's back. He's a great young man, great kid, great leader, great player. The fall sports, I think right now it's the unknown. And I think that as we all continue to navigate through this uncharted territory, uncharted water, or the new normal, whatever phrase, is appropriate, everybody's planning and working really hard. But we're working really hard, not really knowing what that destination and the timing of that destination is going to look like. So I think the one thing that's somewhat is that this is affecting everybody, right? The dead period. Recruiting stopped on March 14th, 15th, 16th-ish, where we just said we're going to slow go it, and then it kept getting delayed and delayed and delayed. So recruiting has taken a completely different lens where we're actually looking at, you're used to having people on campus. You're used to going to watch them play. You're used to being able to, do home visits for some of your candidates and prospects. All that's on pause. Everything's by Zoom. And FaceTime and email, but we're not getting them to campus. We're not getting to their homes. But that's the same for everybody. The one equalizer right now in this challenge that we're all facing is that everybody's facing the same challenge. And the Power 5 conferences are facing unique challenges. We're facing unique challenges. Hey, I think that at the end of the day, we're all facing a new higher education, intercollegiate athletics is a very, we look at it as 6 months, 12 months, 12 months, right? We've got 6 months through this fiscal year, getting through the end of the spring, the summer, preseason, and the next fiscal year, and then the next 12 after that. So we've kind of broken it down by 6, 12, and 12, right? And trying to do our best because obviously one will have implications on the other, right? Budget will have implications. But again, lots of moving parts, Max, lots of moving parts. And I know people spending a lot of time with a lot of models and a lot of Zooms and trying to be as creative as they can.
And Rick, you talk about recruiting and how it's getting affected. A lot of Zooms, a lot of phone calls. I know it's something coaches around the country are getting worried about. And I know it's something me and Ryan talked about. Are we going to see an influx now of kids who might choose the stay-at-home option rather than maybe going out of state to play sports if they're asked to continue? Kids on Long Island who want to stay here instead of, I got an offer from a school in Ohio, I'm going to take that instead of just stay home.
I think that's a distinct possibility. I think that families might be a little cautious and nervous. I have a unique opportunity, Max. I have 3 now college-age athletes that one's in New Rochelle, one's in Durham. My son's going to head to the West Coast of Pepperdine. So we're going to be all over the country, right? And I really love my kids, love my family, but I'm pretty sure that if the front door could open and they could run back to campus, they'd run right now and wave as they were heading down the street. I think people want to get back to campus. They want to get back to their other family, their friends, their bonds, their teams, their teammates. When we go to campus and that undergraduate experience is very special, and in some ways the hard part, and listen, we all know there's a greater thing here and there are real issues and there are people that are just suffering, incredibly so, whether they personally or their loved ones are. So when we talk about getting back to college, you almost feel like, oof, where's your sensitivity? But I do think people want to get back to what they know and what they love, right? And that whole seize the moment, seize the opportunity, and really value it is going to have a new meaning for all of us in our generations, right? Because this is really hitting us very uniquely. We'll never forget this. I'll be 70-something in 20-something years. You're going to be, in your 40s. We'll never forget this ever, and the indelible mark it's left on all of us. So I think that people are going to want to return to what they're comfortable and know. I think that it's a unique piece when people are making decisions, right? And that commitment to admissions or commitment to athletics. I think that there's a real question mark, right? Because everybody looks through a different lens, But I'd like to say, I honestly believe that I would like to say that I'm optimistic and hopeful that we'll have people excited to be back and get here, but there certainly will be challenges.
No, I'm just as excited to be back too. I think I'm ready to see some sports again, just get back into the swing of college here, make something happen. And now, Rick, to wrap this up here, I think the big question now that everyone wants to be asked is, and you touched on it a little bit, what's next for Hofstra Athletics? And let's just whittle it down a bit. What's next for the fall sports? They're kind of the next teams on the docket for their season. What comes next for them?
Well, what comes next is we have to do a real, it's really global, right? So our students coming back to campus, because that's phase one. On the national landscape, the Power 5, the footballs, all of us are saying once it's healthy and safe for people to come back to campus, we can make what adjustments are needed if they are needed. If they're not needed, and we can come back for the normal preseason or some or 2 or 3 and get back to some semblance of normalcy, then man, how excited will we all be? I caution, and I've had this conversation with some of my friends, we can't have ignorance be, only to be exceeded by our arrogance to think that we have the crystal ball and answers to what this pandemic means and the impact it'll have and when it goes away, right? I'm an athletic director. I'm not a infectious disease expert or any kind of biomedical anything. So I'm humble enough to know that we've got to wait, right? We've got to wait and make sure that we're working towards getting kids back in an environment where it's safe and healthy. And once that happens, we can make adjustments to preseason if needed or non-conference. And I think those are all the models I referred to earlier of how do we make it work once we are able to come back, pending on the timing of when we are able to come back.
All right, well, Rick, I think that's the perfect way. It's just kind of a waiting game now. I mean, I think we all want to get back, but you just got to play it safe with this. So, Rick Cole Jr., Athletic Director at Hofstra University, thank you very much for joining us today.
Max, thanks so much. Stay safe, and I hope you and your family and loved ones and friends are well, and I appreciate you having us on, and hopefully we'll see each other in person real soon.
Hopefully. Stay safe. Have a nice day.
Yeah.
So that was Athletic Director Rick Cole Jr., everyone.
I mean, what an interview. Obviously giving us a lot of information there, a lot of to digest. But Max, what was really your big takeaway from that interview?
We can't rush. Ryan, we all want sports to get back. We're all excited. We all want to get back to calling things, but we can't jump the gun here. If that means we have to wait a bit more, we wait a bit more. As much as we don't want to do it, you got to be safe.
And that's the big thing. It really hit home when it comes to what Rick Cole Jr. said about athletes are itching to come back onto campus. And I don't even think it's just athletes. I think everyone is itching to come back to campus and just come back to doing their normal things and getting back to the normal routine. Obviously, it's not safe to do that right now, but I think with that in mind, we need to make sure that we take these things slow, like you're saying, Max, and really take it one step at a time when it comes to real life and when it comes to sports as well, whether it's recruiting and trying to figure out the next steps for the program. It's going to be definitely an interesting next few months at least, if not longer, to figure out how this is all sported in the real world and especially in the sports landscape as well. But Max, always bringing the good stuff. Appreciate talking to you, man. It's good to see you. And now we are going to go shift over and talk about the CAA and how sadly the March Madness tournament was canceled. It's something that we all look forward to, and just obviously heartbreaking announcement there that had effect on not only all collegiate teams, but especially on Hofstra's campus as well, with the men's basketball team qualifying for the first time in 19 years. I'm going to bring on Luis Grosso and David Lazar now to kind of break down that whole situation. Luis, David, so good to see you guys. Man, before we get into kind of the hard stuff, how you guys have been doing and coping with this whole quarantine and shutdown?
Staying positive, trying to get outside, taking the little victories. My relationship with my dog is at an all-time high, getting a lot of walks with him. So right now, as Max and Eddie said, it's about staying positive, and I'm really doing well right now.
Yeah, I think staying positive and staying as constructive as possible is extremely key. During these times, I've been writing a sports blog, been trying to stay updated with everything, and extremely honored to be part of the first virtual Sports Beat episode. So, I'm ready to hop right into it.
All right. Yeah, no, it's definitely, David, I think you nailed it on the head there too. I think it's all about taking things positively and putting things into perspective. You mentioned your daughter. I mean, I spent a lot of time with family. That has been much needed, and definitely whether you can err on the side where maybe it's a little bit too much time, definitely appreciated up to this point. But let's hop right into talking about the CAA and March Madness now. CAA, I mean, before we get into kind of the nitty gritty, let's talk about that men's basketball journey, because what an incredible one it was for that team. I mean, there were so many ups and downs throughout that 2019-2020 campaign, ultimately leading up to that tournament in DC. Why don't you just guys take me through kind of what the season was like and ultimately what that tournament was like for this men's basketball team?
Starting with the tournament, the atmosphere of the CAA tournament was absolutely electric. The team had a chip on their shoulder from the season prior, and they delivered. There were few moments where they felt secure. They had to truly work and persevere for every moment of victory that they earned. They had to fight. They played difficult competition. Going against Northeastern was surprising, but it was the rematch that they got. And they left DC as champions. So all in all, it was an incredibly successful run in Washington, DC that made all the struggles of this season worth it. And the Pride now can say they went out on top.
Yeah, I mean, there were plenty of ups and downs this season, but you got to remember that this Hofstra Pride team this year was 14-4 in their conference, 26 wins overall. So, they've been comfortable being the number one seed in the CAA. And so they were ready for that tournament. And, the win in the CAA championship game was the perfect ending to a year-long story with their rival, with the Hofstra Pride's rival, Northeastern. They defeated the number 6 seed Northeastern to end their 19-year drought, and they won their the CAA championship. And, and we all remember from the 2019 CAA championship game, Northeastern upset Hofstra, and Hofstra was the number 1 seed then too. So, and in this 2019 championship game, Hofstra took it home. It was the perfect ending to that story, and we were all really excited to see where they were going to go in March Madness.
Yeah, you mentioned it. I mean, it was sweet that obviously we won, and I mean, as a fan, I was completely in a euphoric state, but to kind of get that edge over Northeastern after going through the heartbreak of last season was definitely made it a little bit sweeter. But let me take you guys into that kind of fan mode here. What was your guys' reaction to finally see Hofstra win that CAA title after 19 years and, book their ticket to the big dance?
I was in a unique situation. I actually was in journalism mode reporting on the tournament live in DC. So being there was unique. It was an experience where I was able to see the Pride's big stars like DeJour Bowie spur a decisive 10-2 run late in the championship. Eli Pemberton absolutely go off in all games, be the leader that the Pride have wanted and have seen consistently. He stepped up. Jalen Ray, he's not leaving. Jalen Ray's coming back, and he was fantastic as well, making huge clutch shots. So I was sitting there courtside watching these players have these unbelievable performances, and I wasn't rooting for the Pride. I was working on writing my article, but I was rooting for these stories. I was rooting for seeing DeJour Bowie, Elijah Pemberton, and Connor Klementovich go out on top, and they did. They played fantastically. Every single player stepped up, and the Pride were able to really do something that they haven't done in a very long time, and they made the Hofstra Pride faithful very proud. There were tears on that court after the championship. There were tears behind the TV watching CBS Sports Network. That was an unbelievable moment for the entire Hofstra Pride community.
Yeah, and David, you had plenty of great points there, and I think that in sports we get so caught up in the competition and all about that, but it's the emotion that gets the fans into it. It's the emotion that drives these teams. Like you said, you have Eli Pemberton averaging over 17 points per game. He picks up 24 games against Delaware, and then in the championship game puts 19 in the basket. And I think that that's the guy that we've been seeing. This is a guy who was a leader even in his younger seasons. This is a guy who's been maturing over time, a stand-up guy who I got to know personally working at WRHU covering the basketball team. Like you said, DeJour Bowie, averaging over 18 points per game, 6 assists. This guy is aggressive in the paint, never gives up. I was extremely impressed with him. He knows how to draw fouls, be clutch, and he has a high basketball IQ. And I think that, we saw Hofstra be successful, and those two were the leaders that were really going to step this team up to their top game.
Now, we all know where this kind of story kind of shifts, and it was kind of a progression of events that kind of happened leading up to ultimately what was the cancellation of March Madness. I mean, luckily, Hofstra still had the opportunity to compete in that CAA tournament, but a lot of tournaments from around the country started getting canceled, and we started to see the Ivy League, one of them. We started to see a bunch of these tournaments falling. And what was kind of your experience like going through that progression, seeing all this happen? Did you expect that this March Madness tournament was finally going to get canceled, and you can kind of feel it looming in the air?
Sports are a fundamental pillar of society, and without them, the world feels incomplete. And once March Madness was canceled, it was apparent there was trouble. But before it, there was this kind of silent elephant in the room where something was going wrong. I know that in the press room at the CAA tournament before Coach Mihalick and the players came on, that's what we talked about. Is the tournament going to happen? What's the COVID-19 update? What's happening? But then the players came, the coach came, and we celebrated the victory. We asked great questions about the game, about the big moment. And we just kind of, tried to focus on sports, because that's what sports do. Sports are the unifier. Sports are the distraction. And we have never been in a point in society where sports have just been canceled like this. So before this all happened, you had to be scared. You had to be looking at the health world and saying, what's going to happen? But when it did, it was a rock. It was a weight on our shoulders where really we were just taken aback and surprised, because without sports, society does feel incomplete.
Yeah, I think that we were all just waiting for the answer, and we still are in the world waiting for answers. But during this time, we saw 5-time national champ Duke University pulling out before March Madness even started. You saw teams starting to be concerned for the future, for their health. And March Madness and the NBA canceling it around the same time, that just made everyone realize that the other sports were going to be stopping too. It's just we all tried to keep that brave face, tried to stay positive, and try to be as positive going forward into the future. But sadly, we saw what happened.
Now, David, I think you put it perfectly there. I think sports is often the thing that we go to kind of get our minds off of the outside world. And especially at a time like this, a tough time like this, where so much is going around us and it's constantly coronavirus. It feels like we need sports now more than ever, but it's just not there to go to. But just to lead into now my final question here for you too, looking at the grander scheme of things of the cancellation of March Madness, obviously it's a time where the top basketball athletes in the country come together and compete for the most prestigious title. How do you think this cancellation kind of has a ripple effect in the future, whether that's the NBA draft, whether that's prospects or collegiate athletes getting more exposure? What are your thoughts on kind of the effects moving forward after this?
I think that you have to put health first, and you want to have sports. You want to have all the great things that come from it, but you have to put the individual, the humanity aspect first. And I think what you're having is players focusing on time with their family, not training as much. You're having positivity is the ultimate cure right now. You need to stay positive. You need to work on your mental health as well as your physical health, as well as the social distancing, as well as everything that we're being told. It's a tough time right now. It really is. But I think you're going to see basketball, the sports world, we don't know. It's an unprecedented time. So I think you're going to watch the health officials take the lead and then the sports officials follow. And that is how we are going to walk back into society.
Yeah, before ending off here, I did want to touch on, like you said, Ryan, the guys who are going into the draft in the upcoming draft and the upcoming years. I don't think that this tournament necessarily will affect the guys going, this senior class. I mean, they wanted to play, they were hungry, but they've been the serious draft picks have been scouted for a long time. I feel like the younger players, there's no better time to step up than during March Madness, during the NCAA tournament. I think that for someone to prove and a team that has something to prove, I think that the younger guys will, it's a little bit tougher for them. So yeah, that's the final point that I wanted to make.
That's a great point, Lewis. So everybody, now we have the moment you have all been waiting for. Hofstra men's basketball coach Joe Mihalick is live with us on SportsBeat, and I'm very excited to talk with him about the CAA tournament and how he's doing. So welcome to the show.
Hey, David, thanks for having me here. It's great listening to you guys. You've done a great job of breaking it down. I'm anxious to visit some more.
Of course. So after the final buzzer sounded at that CAA tournament, people were showing you stat sheets. You were getting interviewed by media, but I couldn't help but notice that you were frequently staring at the student section and your players cutting down the net. What did that moment mean for Hofstra as a whole?
Yeah, hard to put into words. It was so meaningful. It was so emotional. It was so gratifying. It was the punctuation, the exclamation point on a great year. And a journey that began a long time ago. I mean, not to personalize it, but it's been 7 years for me and 19 years for the rest of Hofstra University to get back to this NCAA tournament. So I just wanted time to stand still. I wanted it to go slow. I wanted to see DeJour Bowie smiling. I wanted to see Elijah Pemberton smiling. I wanted to see Isaac Conti cheering with the band, our incredible band, and our cheerleaders and dance line people, and the students that came down. Some of our volleyball players came down. So I was just trying to drink it in, and like I said, I just wanted it to go in slow motion because I wanted it to last forever.
And in a truly kind gesture, you gave your CAA championship trophy to Fast Eddie, the team's bus driver, bringing tears to his eyes. What does he mean for the program?
Yeah, he's a special guy. He's a one in a million guy. I don't know what it would be like to be on a bus without Fast Eddie driving us. He's Eddie Delastrita is his name, of course, and he is Hofstra. He's not just Hofstra basketball, although he seems a little more special to us than some of the others, but he is Hofstra athletics, and he's somebody that's been around. And I think when they cut him open, he'll bleed blue and white. That's for sure.
And you personally, you touched on it. There were countless hours of blood, sweat, and tears for that championship. What do you think about when you think of all the work you put in as a coach to achieve this moment?
Well, it's. I think I speak for myself and all the other coaches and players. It's a labor of love. It really is. It's as hard as we work and the time we put in and the blood and the sweat, the tears. it doesn't seem like a job. We just love doing it so much. There's endless hours in the office, and it's 7 days a week, and it doesn't even hit you. That's like you just don't. It's just where else would you rather be? I lucky to be doing what I'm doing, and I think I speak for everybody when I say that. But it's the investment was worth it, because that feeling that you have when you win the championship and climb up that ladder with a pair of scissors, it's just, as I've said already, you can't put into words.
When you think of all the players, coaches, and students that came before you, what exactly goes through your head?
Yeah, there's a lot of guys that, you said before me, right? There's some players before me?
Yes.
Right? Dave, yeah. You kind of, this great basketball tradition and history was built a long, long time ago. With people like Steve Nisenson, who was our all-time leading scorer and played back in the early 60s. And then, Kenny Root and Richie Laurel, who played in the 70s. And, and then, of course, Speedy and Norm Richardson, who played in the late 90s and right into 2000. And then, again, just to personalize it a bit for me, I think about these 7 years, and as I'm climbing up that ladder, I'm thinking about Zeke Upshaw, I'm thinking about Dion Nesmith, and I'm thinking about Wanye Green and Amin Tanksley and Brian Bernardi, and I'm thinking about Rokas Gustis, and I'm thinking about Justin Wright Foreman, and I could mention 50 other names of people I'm thinking about, because those guys played such a big role in us finally climbing up the ladder and cutting down those nets.
3 current players who play a huge role in cutting down those nets. That's Jajor Bowie, Elijah Pemberton, and Connor Klementovich. They're the seniors. How much did these 3 guys mean to the program?
Well, I mean, they were the heart and soul of our program, and and you got to see Jajor and Elijah, but I don't know if people ever realize how important Connor Klementovich was to our team. Just a one in a million guy. Couldn't do enough for the team, never wanted any credit, blood and guts kind of guy, never said no to anything, worked as hard as anybody else, and never got to play and never got the spotlight. And I'm glad this year he did get some of the spotlight, because he deserved it. Just a great. Yeah. And then, of course, Jajor and Elijah. I mean, Elijah ends his career with 1,982 points. So if we would have played Villanova in the NCAA tournament, and we would have upset them, we would have played another game. But if we would have played Villanova, who knows? Maybe Elijah gets those 18 points and gets to that magical 2,000 point mark. But he's still going to go down history as one of the all-time greats in Hofstra basketball. He's a top 10 scorer. He'll be there for a long time, and he had just a heck of a career. Then, of course, Jajor, had a year like no other. He was the player of the year in the conference. He didn't get that trophy or that award, but we all know he was the player of the year in the conference. He led us to first place in a regular season championship. And then he proved he was the player of the year in the conference, because, we won the conference tournament. But his career was such a stellar career that I actually think his retiring number, that he gets into the conversation of retired numbers. That's what a great career he had.
My follow-up question to that is, it's heartbreaking to see that there will be no March Madness, but those 3 players, they're going out as champions. As their coach, how does that make you feel?
Well, they deserve that. They deserve that, and they also deserved to play in the NCAA tournament, see what that was like. And but life's not fair. There's a lot of things in life that aren't fair, and you have to deal with them. And there's a bigger problem out there that we got to deal with, and that's this worldwide pandemic. But even though Jajor and Elijah didn't they got kind of deprived or robbed of being in the NCAA tournament. They did get to finish their career as champions, and with the biggest smile ever on their faces. And so their last college championship game and their last college basketball game, they've won a championship, and as we've said a couple times already, cut down the nets and carried the trophy, and squirted water on the coach. I mean, it was that's something that they can. That's a memory that will last a lifetime.
The baton is now passed to Jalen Ray, who will be coming back, as well as other players. He was unbelievable, Jalen Ray, specifically in DC, making countless clutch shots that really helped your team. What are your expectations for him next year as he takes control?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to put the pressure on him a little bit.
That is
We here? Sorry about that. We there?
Yes, we're still here.
I'm not hearing you right now. I don't know.
Can you hear me, David? Now?
We back?
We are back and live. We can hear you.
Hear you,
can you hear me? Mm-hmm.
Hold on. I'm sorry. I lost your.
Can you hear me?
Hear me?
We can hear you.
So Jalen Ray, we're going to put the pressure on him a little bit. You know, we're gonna insist that he become a star, even more of a star than he is right now, because he's a great star, great player. He's a clutch player. He makes big shots, and he is. I think he's up to the challenge too. I think he laid around in the background, and I think he's ready to take that step now and be one of our stars, as is Tariq Coburn and Isaac Conti. That's 3 returning starters, and then we'll wait for some other guys to emerge.
Can you hear me now, Coach?
See, I'm not hearing you now, so I don't know what to do about that. Sorry, I screwed up with this.
Coach, it was an honor to have you.
Hold on.
I know you can't hear me right now, but hopefully you can hear us later when you go back and listen to this. Congratulations.
I'm sorry, David. I can't hear you.
Season.
Can you sign language?
Sure. We're all good. We're going to wrap
Thank
now.
you.
But thank you so much for coming.
Thanks to everybody. Going to be a great year next year. Everybody stay safe, stay healthy, and let's all do what we're supposed to do, what the medical experts and the government people are asking us to do. Let's stay safe. Thank you.
That was Hofstra head coach Joe Mihalick. And as you could see, the world is currently in chaos, and there are technology that we have to do. We did a great job there getting amazing insight from Coach Joe Mihalick. It was fantastic to hear him talk about what it's like after really reflecting for a few weeks now. He's a fantastic interview, a fantastic person to talk to. Ryan, welcome back to the show. It was great to talk to Joe Mihalick.
Yeah, no, I mean, that guy's always got something great to say, and I think there's just so much to dissect from that interview, and always bringing the insight, always putting things into perspective. But for you, David, what was really kind of some of the key takeaways that you really jumped out for you on the page?
For me, you can see it through the camera. Coach Joe Mihalick, he wants to stay positive, and he is staying positive. He's doing a great job really reflecting on this moment, but he wanted to play in March Madness. He thought they could win. They thought they could win. The Hofstra community thought that they could win this thing, and you could hear that through the camera, through the screen, that Coach Joe Mihalick, while he's fantastically happy that, yes, his 3 seniors went out on top, he also really, really wanted that chance for March Madness. It's something that he's been waiting for a while. Hofstra's been waiting for 19 years. And unfortunately, they're not going to get it. But what they are going to get is next year, hopefully, Jalen Ray is going to come back. Tariq Coburn's going to come back. Hopefully, there will be a season. And hopefully, the Pride can repeat and move on to the NCAA tournament.
And that was the interesting thing for me. I mean, it's a balance of 2 things where it's like, you know, it's great that you came out as champions, which is an opportunity that, you know, not many collegiate players can say that they, you know, finish their careers like that. But at the same time, I mean, you want to go to that big dance, and you want to at least have the shot of, you know, shocking the world. And unfortunately, they won't get that opportunity. But what illustrious careers for those seniors, for DeJour Bowie, for Elijah Pemberton, and for Connor Klementovich. And I mean, the whole entire team, the season that they had, the 2019-2020 campaign, just absolutely incredible. And just a great shout out for that men's basketball team and all the stuff that they were able to do this season. But David, thank you for coming on. Thank you for bringing us all the best in that interview. And we'll have you on it soon.
Thank you so much, Ryan. We'll see you soon.
Now it's time to transition to a little bit of a senior reflection here and talk about kind of what it's like for these senior athletes that are in an interesting time right now. And I want to bring on our next analyst, Lou Akimano, to kind of have that discussion with me. Lou, how's it going, man? It's been a while since we've talked with each other, been on the air together. How are you doing?
It's been far too long, Ryan. I miss it, honestly, as long with everybody else. It's been a crazy time, and let's just get right into it. Let's talk about some seniors.
All right. So let's talk about some seniors. It's hard for me to put into words kind of what this is like. I mean, I guess we can kind of grasp what it's kind of like in terms of our broadcasting careers and how, you know, we're kind of going to that senior and we kind of didn't get to go out the way we wanted to. But for these athletes that have put in so much blood, sweat, and tears into these programs, into these teams, what could possibly be going through their mind right now for those senior players?
You know, Ryan, right now it's a hectic time during this hiatus. The fact that for the fall athletes, their season was cut short, very abrupt, because of this invisible enemy, this virus that's been killing people. The peak is this week, so the fact that everyone has to social distance is just crazy. And the fact that now we have these spring athletes that don't know what to do per se with staying in college or whether or not they want to transfer. It's been a hectic time for everybody, and even as a sports fan, it's just been absolutely insane. Without sports, I don't know what to do with my life.
Yeah, no, you and me both. And I think that's the crazy thing about the whole senior situation is because we have a bunch of different, I don't want to say groups, but a bunch of different kind of sectors of seniors that have kind of had a unique experience. I mean, you look at the fall athletes, they were able to finish their season. We look back at, let's say, the incredible season that the women's soccer team was able to have, upsetting that first round NCAA. Then you look at the heartbreak at what was this winter season with the men's basketball team and how they weren't able to go out on the way they want to go, qualifying, like we mentioned, for the first time in 19 years to that March Madness tournament. And then you look at the spring sport athletes who they didn't even get to play their season. I mean, they were a few games in and it got cut short. I mean, managing and those emotions between those seniors is pretty incredible. But I want to jump into this, Lou. We've been a part of this Hofstra sports community and as we followed these teams, obviously these seniors have had a major impact on the Hofstra sports world, but also on us as being fans of Hofstra sports and covering them for this majority of time. So I'll start by saying this, Lou. As you are approaching the end of your senior career, which is a little bit apropos, what seniors have kind of made an impact on you throughout this time that you've been covering Hofstra sports?
Yeah, Ryan, you're right. I only got a couple more weeks left being a senior at Hofstra University in my undergrad. And I know as well you do too, which is crazy to think about, the fact that we've been doing this for a long time now. I've been with Hofstra field hockey for their first season, my first season, and the fact that they were my first team, I looked towards Madison Warfel. She was such a leader for her team, being a senior. The fact that she had such young talent around her, and she made them better. And Merline Vandervet, who's a goalie, even though Madison's an offensive player, she helped Merline get better every day. Juna Slort, Cami Larson. The fact that Coach Vino has these talented players, they're losing somebody special in Madison.
Yeah, and it's very reflective of kind of, because I've kind of went through that same process where you always have that unique spot, that unique place in your heart for kind of that first team that you covered. And for me, like you said, with field hockey, for me, it was women's lacrosse, and being able to interact with Alyssa Perella, who we all know is one of the Hofstra greats for that program, but also Darcy Smith, and being able to kind of talk with her and build close relationships with them and trying to take us through the mind of what it's like to go through a season like this women's lacrosse. It's crazy to think that it's ending the way that it is. At least for the spring sports, they do have that opportunity to maybe move on and have that extra year of eligibility. But it's really hard for me right now to put into words what it's like to be a senior athlete right now, whether you played in any of those seasons. And obviously, you'll get an opportunity now to talk with two of them.
Yeah, Ryan, it has been a crazy time, and hopefully these two seniors can give us some more insight to that. We have two seniors right here for you guys. We have senior guard Connor Klementovich from the men's basketball team, and we also have Ryan Tierney, who plays for the men's lacrosse team. Guys, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Ryan, I'll start with you. How have you and your teammates been during this hiatus?
Yeah, I mean, it's been tough getting something yanked from you that you worked all year for. Just kind of keep a level head and trying to figure out next year, because there's a lot of little particulars that people aren't seeing in the news that we have to figure out for next year, and trying to just stay in shape and hope for the best right now.
Connor, Hofstra has been back to the NCAA tournament since 2001. With the loss of Justin Wright-Foreman going to the NBA, did you think this journey was going to play out like this before the season even started?
You know what? I feel like a lot of people outside of the team didn't think it would end up like the way it did. But especially me and the seniors, but the rest of the team, we had the idea right after we lost in the championship last year that the next day, we were like all back in the weight room. Like we were like, we have to win it next year. So to us, we had to win it. We expected it. So.
Ryan, you're currently reigning CAA Player of the Year. It looks like it's going to go on for another year with this hiatus. On March 14th, you announced on social media you'll be coming back for next season. What made you consider this decision?
Yeah, so we put a lot of thought into it, and people don't realize that the way that I wanted my career to go besides sports was I was going to go commercial real estate, and the market is just not great right now. We don't really know what the job market has in store after this whole pandemic is over. So we thought it would be the best idea for an opportunity to play again, and you don't really get to – not many people get to feel what it feels like to play with their family. So I didn't want to take a year for granted and waste any of that time.
Connor, with you graduating this semester, Hofstra loses one of their vital voices for the team. What are some words of wisdom you would share for players who will still be there and to come?
I would just say, first off, you know what, whether you're playing a lot or not, just enjoy it. You only get college one time. It's the best years of your life. Being part of an athletics program like Hofstra is amazing. I mean, everybody on every team is amazing. So I would just say, just enjoy what you're doing and just know your role and perfect your role. That's it.
Connor, just a quick follow-up question. Coach Mihalick was just here. He had such high praise for you. He said you brought so much blood, sweat, tears. You're one in a million of the kids on the roster. Do you have anything nice to say about Coach?
I mean, I got 100 things to say nice about Coach. Coach is amazing. I mean, he gave me an opportunity that no other coach would give me, and he reminds me of like my dad. So when I was away from home, he was there to give me guidance and advice. I mean, there's nothing I can't say bad about him. He's just an amazing guy.
Ryan, the fact that you have this extra year of eligibility and could come back to play here at Hofstra University, what does that mean specifically for you to finish off your senior year right?
Yeah, we just have unfinished business. Me and my dad, we set out with some goals and we haven't achieved them yet. And we were on track this year, and it got pulled from us. And I don't really want to leave without hitting those goals and those expectations. So I'm thankful that I have this opportunity.
Connor, since this is a senior spotlight segment, what is your favorite memory at Hofstra University?
I mean, definitely winning the CAAs, man. I mean, I can't. That was an amazing.
You can't top that. Nothing else.
That was the best. That was the best.
I feel that. And Ryan, anything for you? I know you have that one semester left, but if you were to graduate today or this semester, what would that be?
My memory would be the guys that I live with. I got really close with them over the years, and I'm lucky enough because most of them had fifth years that I get to graduate with them, and that's something I didn't have the opportunity before this pandemic. So I'm very, very thankful for the memories that we're going to make next year and being with them and being able to finish my career with the same people I started with.
And finally, Connor, what are your plans after your final semester here at Hofstra?
I'm actually trying to do a fifth year of a different sport at a different school. That's my goal, but I mean, I'm working on it right now, but this coronavirus is a lot to deal with, so we'll see.
100%. I get that completely. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on. Talk to you guys soon. Stay safe. Wash your hands. And like I said, hope to talk to you guys soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Lou. Well, fantastic interview. There are a lot of interesting things, to say the least, when it comes to seniors Connor Klementovich and Ryan Tierney of the men's basketball team and men's lacrosse team, respectively. But you really getting to have that discussion with them, Lou, what really stood out to you?
Ryan, you got two different personas right there. The fact that, one gets to come back and, finish out their career. And, unfortunately for Connor, it was cut short, but it will all work out in the end. God has a plan, and I feel that it will all be right in due time.
And I think that was the most interesting thing, was the dynamics and kind of the perspective that each of them had, because obviously they were faced with different situations. Connor, he knows that the career is done, at least when it comes to men's basketball. Obviously, you got to go out, and you can see the joy in his face about reminiscing about the CAA title that they did win, him saying that it was one of the best moments of his 4 years at Hofstra. But then being able to see that Ryan kind of reflecting and saying that he has unfinished business and having that opportunity to get that done. Kind of what stood out to you with that dynamic that you're talking about in terms of one kind of getting ready for the end and one still kind of hungry for more?
It's crazy to think about. I mean, we just heard Connor just say he was going to pick up another sport, but unfortunately, with all this stuff happening, it's been hard. I think they're both hungry, and the fact that Connor, I've known Connor for a very long time. We went to the same high school in Gill St. Bernard's for a little bit, and the fact that he's still the same kid. He's hungry for more, and he just wants to be that guy. And, for Ryan, he's determined, and like he said, he has unfinished business, and he's got a goal in mind, and he wants to keep to that mantra, that whole thing. It's amazing.
Yeah, definitely interesting. Well, that wraps up that last segment. But before we go anywhere, I want to bring all our analysts back in that did such a great job this evening, bringing in all the great stuff, all the great takes to give you the insight and breaking down all the Hofstra sports and more. We're going to do a little bit of Q&A here. I asked you listeners out there to partake in the conversation, get involved with our Hofstra community here, and tell us what you guys are thinking, what your thoughts are, what your questions are about Hofstra sports. So guys, let's take it away. Let's see what the Hofstra sports fans have to say about the current state of Hofstra sport. All right, aside from the CAA championship, what was your favorite moment from this season from MJ Smooth? Eddie, let's start with you.
Definitely my favorite moment for the basketball team this season. I mean, I guess it's got to be one of the basketball teams is their ability to, whenever their chips were down on senior day, was definitely, they weren't playing the greatest team in JMU. They were at the bottom of the conference. However, the way that they came out, everybody showed out for that game. The entire David S. Mack Sports and Exhibition Arena was popping. It was unreal. It was so much fun to just be there, be in the moment, and then afterwards, everybody's kind words when DeJour, Eli, and Connor took the mic. It brought a little bit of tears to my eye, and it was just really awesome to see that from a fan and a journalist perspective.
Surprising answer from me. I'm going to go with the season opener where Hofstra fell to San Jose State. And I think Coach Mihalick would actually agree with me here because this was such an important, formative moment for this team. They lose that opener, and that showed them we need to work in order to achieve our goals. Coach said so many great things in press conferences after where that was an eye-opening moment for this team. That was one of the moments where without that, the team doesn't win the CAA championship. It was such a character builder. It was such an amazing moment where that team could say, this is our time. This is our season. We need to improve upon these weaknesses. And I think in that game, in that home opener, that was where the team really grew some character.
Guys, we're missing the big one here. Women's soccer CAA championship. The NCAA game was huge, but the CAA championship, I mean, what more of a storybook way to do it? Your seniors go out on top. You make it 3 straight titles. First time since William and Mary did it back in the early 2000s. And more than that, we beat JMU. That's always the big rival for Hofstra. You can't write a better script, and it was at home. The student section was crazy that game. Just a fun memory with that women's soccer team.
Yeah, I think what I'm going to go with is earlier in 2020 in January and I know I've been focusing on Northeastern a lot, but when Eli Pemberton got that last second with half a second left on the clock, he got that last second layup and scored 24 points the whole game. And I think that was part of the story, like I said, leading up to that final game in the CAA championship.
I think you guys are missing the big picture here. I don't know if you guys recall this, but we beat UCLA at UCLA for men's basketball. And I believe that determines how great we were this year. And the fact that there was a lot of media coverage for that for a little bit. I also saw one of my role models, Dick Vitale, tweet out, Hofstra is the main story of discussion tonight. And that was just incredible to see.
Yeah, no, I definitely all agree options there. I mean, obviously the CA title was absolutely incredible, but it's hard to choose one out of all you guys because they're all fantastic moments. I've got time for one question here. What will be the best team on campus next year? Will Wiggleman is asking that question. Shout out to Will. Lou, I'm going to start with you here. Who's going to be the best team? I got one in mind. I think Max might side with me here. I have a feeling. But Lou, what do you got?
To be honest with you, I think basketball is going to keep rolling. Men's basketball is going to keep killing it. The fact that we have all this extra talent coming in, there's no reason why we wouldn't be as good as this year as the next year, to be honest with you.
Well, I mean, I guess I have to say I'm going to go with the team that I got to know a lot this year. I think it's going to be women's lacrosse, regardless of whether or not Alyssa Perella comes back, regardless whether or not Darcy Smith comes back. You know, those are two very big senior leaders, but you still have Matera. You still have Katie Whalen. You saw Grace Langella and Taylor Manella come in. Sabrina Crisadero, a killer in the midfield. Erin Tierney stepping up on defense. And you had Jess Smith, who's going to be a junior, playing like an All-American in net. This team is not done. They are not going anywhere anytime soon. Very young, very potent, lots of potential. I'm calling CAA championship right now.
I'm going to go with the Hofstra wrestling team. This team went 11-5 overall, 7-0 in conference, and not only were they dominant on the mat, almost double-digit Hofstra wrestling members received all academic honors. This has to be the most complete on and off the mat team that Hofstra has. They went undefeated in conference play. I don't think there's any other Hofstra sport that has done that. So I am going to go with the Hofstra wrestling team as a surprise upset for the best team on campus next season.
All right. Well, David took the words out of my mouth. I think we all knew where my pick was going to go for this one. I am supporting the Hofstra Pride wrestling team. All of you, put your hands up. We all follow different teams. What team here had not one, but two, but three members make it to the national tournament?
I refuse to play your game.
Nobody else's hand.
Yeah, we didn't. I mean, the women's lacrosse team didn't have a tournament, so they would have had more.
My team.
Hofstra Wrestling is the team to follow. Their average age on that team is a sophomore. That's the average class of their starting 11 wrestlers, starting 10, excuse me. But that is the team to follow. They had an undefeated season. They have a coach who's red hot now. He has a good team behind him, and they have national tournament qualifiers who are ready to come back even stronger next year. This team is going to be the team to watch and the team to follow next season. Coach Papadatos, you have a great team. Send us some hoodies.
Yeah, I think you guys covered most of it. I'm going to go with the obvious ones. Women's soccer is going to do amazing like they always do. And again, the men's basketball team is going to be electric. They're hungry after this, disappointing end to their season, not being able to go into March Madness like we've talked about. I mean, those two teams have some of the biggest leaders on the Hofstra campus. So let's see what they can do in the future.
Max, I'm disappointed. I get why you said wrestling, but I really thought you were going to go with what Lou was saying and say women's soccer. This team is crazy. They're not losing any of their best players. They're going to go
undefeated. They're not undefeated.
Oh, it's true enough, but who knows? It's going to be great. But there's definitely going to be a lot of teams that are going to be great to watch as we all sit here waiting for sports to come back. We all understand the situation at stake here, that we all need to be safe. We all need to take things slow and make sure that it's safe to come back. But once sports does come back, I think there's going to be a huge sigh of relief for everyone here, including us and all the rest of the Hofstra community, as we wait for kind of all these sports to kind of get back into action. Well, that will do it for us on this first ever virtual edition of Sports Beat. Thank you to all our amazing analysts, David, Eddie, Max, Lewis, Lou. Fantastic job this evening, always bringing in the great stuff. And thank you to all of our special guest coaches, Joe Mihalick, Connor Clementovich, Ryan Tierney, and Athletic Director Rick Cole Jr. Until next time, I'm your host, Ryan Yee, signing off. Stay safe, stay healthy, and always roll with pride.
Hey, we still got him.
I'll throw my phone.
Right.
I don't have any paper, but great job, boys.
We still got it.